Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. Welcome to Positive Talk, everybody. My name is Kevin McDonald, but you all knew that, or if you didn't know that, you know it now. And we have a great guest for you today, and I really like talking about the subject matter that we are going to be talking about today for two reasons. One is dad, and the other one is history. And I love history and World War II history and the folks that were in the great conflict and as they've gotten older and stuff. And Yvonne was the daughter of a veteran of World War II who was a pilot. He was a navigator. I believe it was a navigator.
He was a navigator
in the on a bomber, and he had the good fortune and the luck to fly over Germany and drop bombs and to make it back, because so many pilots did not make it back, and so many navigators who were on the planes, because there were like 5 or 6 or 7 crew people on each plane, and they made it. He made it through the wars and stuff, and so much so, and it captured Yvonne's imagination. She wrote a book about it. She's also a teacher. Was a teacher for a long time. A psychotherapist, a corporate trainer, a consultant. She's done all kinds of things, and she's with us today for the entire hour. Yvonne, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am fine, thank you. I am fine.
Very good. Now, you've done a lot of podcasts and a lot of radio shows, and so I'm hoping I don't, suck.
I think we're going to be just fine.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. Because it's an important subject matter, because so many people went to World War II, and so many of them are past now. My mother passed when she was 93 years ago, and her 100-year-old boyfriend, who was a pilot in World War II, passed this last year. Mm-hmm. And so the greatest generation is leaving us now and going to their great reward in the sky, or wherever you choose to believe that's where they go. Well, that's where they're going to get there. But you had a really unique experience with your dad, and let me preface it by saying that most people that were in World War II don't talk about it. They didn't talk about it, or Vietnam, or any other major conflicts that they were in, because it's bringing up those memories is hard for them, because of all the people that they lost, all the friends, the circumstances that they were part of. And so most men of that era, and my dad was young for that era, but he was kind of the same. They're very stoic. They don't talk a great deal about themselves or those things. They're great providers. My dad provided us with a nice home and food and all that. I suspect that, Yvonne, your dad did the same thing for you.
He did. It was happenstance. It was luck. It was grace. In 2008, Dad lived on the other side of the state of Pennsylvania, and we connected via the phone. And it was a dark January night. And after we got through his dialysis treatments and doctor's appointments and those kinds of things, we often stumbled about what to talk about. I was not a sports fan. So on this night, once we got through all of the medical stuff, he told me this quirky, funny, off-the-wall story about making an emergency landing in freed Belgium toward the end of the war. And he'd never said anything. He'd never talked about it. So I said to him, let me get a pencil and paper. I want to take notes. And he said, "What the hell do you want to do that for?" I said, "This is good. This might be something that the family would really like to know." So the very next phone call, a week later, where it came from, Kevin, I don't know, but I said to him, "If you're ready, Dad, or if you're willing, start at the beginning. How did you get in the war?" And story after story, week after week, just came tumbling out of him. And at some point, I said, "I've got a book. I've got a book in this." Now, interestingly enough, my dad never would have had to have gone. He had a presidential deferment that would have kept him out of the war.
Really?
Aha. So here's one of my favorite stories about my dad. He worked in depots at the air bases where young men were learning to fly. And when planes came in that they wrecked up, those were his words, he would fix them. And so an AT-6 came in. This is a two-seater training plane. It didn't have a wing. Dad's job in the beginning would be to call all around to all the different depots and say, "Do you have a wing? Ship it to me." He'd put it back on the plane and the plane would be good to go. No wing. So he went to a supervisor and said, "Do you have a blueprint?" And they said, "Sure. What are you going to do with it?" And Dad said, "I'll build the wing." He's 19 years old.
Wow.
And when the wing, 17 and a half feet of it, was attached to the plane, the pilot who was going to take it up for a test run said to Dad, "Is it going to fly?" And Dad said, "Sure." "You're sure it's going to fly?" "Yeah." "You're positive it's going to fly?" Dad said, "Yeah." And the pilot said, "Then good, son, get in, because if it goes down, you're going down with it."
Smart man.
Smart man. So that's one of the stories. But when Dad was in the air, he said to me, his exact words were, "I didn't want to fix them anymore. I wanted to fly them." So he petitioned to get out of his deferment to end up in the Corps as a cadet, and England, flying from England over Germany and France in 1945.
And for those of you who are not aware, there was a bombing campaign and several bombing campaigns, and there would be, at any given time, probably hundreds of airplanes in the air. And they flew in tight formation, and then they would drop their payload bombs over their target, and then they would return. The crash rate or the shoot down rate was horrific at that moment. You had guys you never knew. You had to be a particularly brave individual because you never knew if you were going to take off and if you were going to actually make it back. Because many people did not. They either ended up in a prisoner of war camp, or they crashed and died, or were shot in the air and died, or as they were on their parachute coming down, many of them died that way.
Yeah.
It was. I first of all thank your dad. I know he's passed now, but thank him for his service. He was, and that was, in my mind, still is, always will be, the greatest generation.
What's interesting for me about my dad is he had 5 missions when finally the war ended. And that was because, again, he didn't get to England until February of 1945. However, one of the things he said to me was, on the first mission that he experienced flak coming back after a mission, He watched plane after plane after plane in their formation go down. And on his bomber, which is a B-24, there were 10 men. And it's why the Air Corps had such heavy losses, because they would lose 10 men at a time. So they experienced flak. These are incendiary bombs that are shot up into the sky. And when they got to the altitude where these planes were flying, they would burst and shrapnel would go everywhere. So the B-24 that Dad was flying, the fuel lines were along the fuselage.
Oh, great.
Yeah. The fuel itself was in bladders that were in the wings. And the Davis wing on a B-24 was fragile. So if they hit just at the right spot, the plane would explode. So Dad's seeing all of this. And he said to me, he said, Yvonne, I was so scared, I peed myself. Now, he's 22,000 feet above the ground. It's 40 to 60 degrees below zero outside. It's not a pressurized cabin. He's breathing oxygen. All right. And what he did was he short-circuited the electric suit that was keeping him warm. So on the interphone, he called to the captain and said, listen, we're almost at the English Channel. Get this bucket of bolts down to an altitude so I don't freeze to death.
Wow.
Yeah, that's one of the stories. Now, interestingly enough, for your audience, that's one of the reasons why Dad came back with what I would now say PTSD. And he told me about his nightmare. It was the same recurring nightmare for 3 years in a row. And he never knew when it was going to hit him. But in the nightmare, his plane is going down. In order for him to get to the bomb bay so that he can jump out, he's got to go through this passageway, and it's stainless steel on both sides. And he's got no purchase. He can't pull himself through. His nightmares were so bad that he literally dug channels in the mattress. And they eventually had to throw the mattress away and buy a new one. So in his, I shouldn't say this, but 5 missions, can you imagine that many of those folks flew 35, 36, 42? So the kinds of things that they came back with in terms of memories, it only took 5 for my dad.
I don't think only is the right word. Because, anytime that you are, I've never been in a situation like that where that you're flying back and the shrapnel and the flak is all around you. You don't know if and when your last minute's going to come, but you're pretty darn sure it's coming pretty quick because everybody else is getting hit by the shrapnel.
Yeah, and that was real to my father, because one of the things that happened when he got overseas is, before he ever went out on his first mission, when they knew that a mission was due to come back, they would go to the control tower and they would stand and they would watch and they would count the planes coming in. So let's say 30 went out and 20 came back. That's 100 men. And you don't know, unless someone also on that mission spotted, hey, the plane went down and all 10 were able to parachute out, or the plane went down in a burst of flame and they doubted that anybody survived. So it was only if someone was close enough in that formation to see what happened. And oftentimes they would get conflicting stories.
Sure. Because things are happening so fast.
Hmm.
And things are, yeah, it's happening so fast. Yvonne, I want to talk just real briefly because I think it's important. I am so glad that your dad and you had developed that relationship where you could open up and he could open up to you, because there are so many people. I had a company that it was called Family Legacies. And what I wanted to do was interview people that were in the last part of their lives and talk about their life and what they did, so that when they passed, they that information and their voice could be continued on through the generations, so their grandchildren, great grandchildren, great grandchildren could hear them and hear their personality and how they laughed and how they talked and stuff. And what I found was most people that are older devalue their life. They don't think it's worth very much. Oh, nobody's going to want to hear my story. My story's not much. Like your dad started off talking about, but
Hmm.
you got him to open up. Do you have any tips that you can help other people that have an older family member that that you might be able to share, that could maybe open them up? Because I interviewed some people that had amazing stories that didn't think their story was amazing. It just was beyond me.
One of the things that I think about is being present with someone who is older. And I worked in a retirement community. So oftentimes, just out of the blue, they would give this little pearl, this little nugget. And that's the time that I would sit back and start to listen. And then I would ask open ended questions. Tell me more about that. Well, when did that happen? Or what was that like for you? Who, what, when, where, and avoid the question why.
Great point.
Um, and that's what happened with Dad. When I said to him, would you start at the beginning? He started when he graduated from high school. And we worked chronologically. So I would say about into the fourth chapter, when Dad was talking about basic training, he got the sense that I was really interested. And that's a key thing too, is when you're sitting there and you're asking these questions, to be really interested. So it's being present, it's asking open-ended questions, it's taking the time to listen.
You just said my favorite thing that is so overlooked in our society. I don't know if it is. I've never lived anywhere else, so I don't know. But the art of listening seems to be a forgotten art. We seem to be wanting, God gave us two ears and one mouth for a reason. And a lot of us think that we've got a bigger mouth than we have ears. So we tend to want to talk about ourselves or what it is rather than listening to
Mhm.
what's being said to you. And I think that's really important.
Well, part of the thing that I think about, and you know, hindsight is 2020. I believe that my training as a teacher and as a psychotherapist led me to have a skill set. And I'll tell your audience, it's a skill set that you can learn. But as a teacher, it was really important for me to listen to the kids. As a psychotherapist, the healing takes place a lot of the time just because for the first time in somebody's life, they are able to sit with someone who will listen to their pain, not shush them away, not say, oh, it wasn't all that bad, not to turn around and walk out of the room. It was just to listen. The healing came in listening, and actually the healing in my relationship with my father came through my listening. Dad and I weren't close. He was greatest generation. There was a roof over our head. There was food on the table. He was there every night. He was good with his sons because they could go hunting and fishing.
Right.
With his daughter, he didn't quite know what to do. So what happened with the writing of this book is the more I listened, the more he opened up. The more he opened up, the more he trusted me. And so when it came time for him to talk about the hard things, I think he began to believe that I would hold that precious information in a very sacred spot.
And you know something? My sister went through the same thing with our dad. And I was an athlete, so he was invested in me, but he didn't know what to do with a little girl. And that happened to so many little girls as they were growing up through that age group, that it's information that is important for them to know they're not alone. It happened to a lot of little girls because they felt isolated, because quite frankly, dad didn't know what to do with them, what to do with you guys. So we need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more with Yvonne Caputo, and she's the author of 2 books. I'm excited to talk about the second book because it is as important as the first book in a really life-changing way. And we're going to talk about that the second half of the show. So I hope you'll stay with us for that, because she's written, and it's really poignant what she's put down. And it's a great series of stories. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Yvonne.
You're listening to Positive Talk Radio. We're going to take a short break to tell you audio and music creators about our commercial affiliate, Lyric Vids, specializing in creating amazing and engaging lyric videos. Are you looking to promote your videos in the most engaging way, but you don't have an animator and an editor? Whether you're an artist, musician, or business with a message to share, our lyric videos are designed to hook viewers and amplify your reach. Go to positivetalkradio.net/lyric vids. That's positivetalkradio.net/LYRICVIDS now to get started. Welcome back to Positive Talk Radio. We hope you enjoyed learning about our affiliate Lyric Vids, who specialize in creating captivating animated lyric videos. Now let's get back to the show.
And welcome back to Positive Talk, everybody. My name is Kevin McDonald, and we're talking with Yvonne Caputo. Caputo, correct? Caputo. She's the author of 2 books. She's also a psychotherapist. She's a corporate trainer and consultant. She used stories to widen the eyes of her students and soften the pain in the hearts of her clients. That's beautifully written, by the way.
Thank you.
And she is with us today because she had, number one, she had a wonderful dad, and thank him for his service. And he was a pilot in World War II. She wrote a book about it called Flying with Dad, and told the stories about it. And then there came a point in time when you said, holy mackerel, this is a book. But did you figure out how to get it published, or did you have somebody help you?
I thought I did a lot of research and a lot of thinking, and to get a book published by a traditional publisher, I could have been under the grass when, that came through. So I looked into independent publishing, and what I did was called hybrid. So I hired someone who would do the cover and get the ISBN numbers and do the proofreading and do all of the technical things that I didn't know how to do. Teaching made me very comfortable with saying, I know when I don't know. So I hired the publisher, Ingenium Books. And the woman that I talked to, Bonnie Wagner Stafford, we have become very good friends. she took the third draft of my book. She threw it in a blender, threw it back to me for almost a total rewrite. But what I ended up having in my hands was something that I never dreamed possible. As a really good editor, she saw something in my writing that I hadn't seen. So that's how the book came to be. And then people who read that first book would comment, I was with my dad when he died. And he and I had got close enough that I had done an advance directive with him. He made me his healthcare agent. That meant I could speak for him when he couldn't speak for himself. And he had said to me over and over again, I want to go feet first out of my own home, which meant that he had died in his house and on a gurney out to the ambulance. And the readers of my book said, how could you do that? Didn't you want to save his life? Where did you find the courage? And that's what, those questions are what led to my writing the second book, which was Dying with Dad. And in that book, I talk about how I became comfortable talking about death and dying. And so with my father, we did an advanced directive. And that said how he wanted to be treated medically. And it gave me the power to speak for him. And then I discovered a document called The 5 Wishes, which was an advanced directive on heart. And it asked for so many other things. How comfortable did he want to be? What did he want his children to know? What kind of a funeral did he want to have? All of those kind of intimate things. So I drove home to my hometown, had this document on the seat of the car, trembling, because my father could yell. And was I going to walk into, he was in the hospital again, was I going to walk into that dad? Or was I going to walk into the softer side of dad? I got the softer side. And we went through this document. And everything that meant something to him was in the document, so that when the time came, the neighbors and they came over to visit at the house, and we heard this thump back in my dad's bedroom. We went back and found him on the floor. Not being a nurse, I didn't know what kind of condition he was in. So we called the EMTs. They came right away. They're working on Dad. And I said, this isn't what Dad wants. And they said, this is what we have to do. So what I then did is call the hospital, because I knew there was a do not resuscitate order on Dad's chart. And I said, get this order to the emergency room. They're bringing Dad in. And thank God, the emergency room doctor called and told the EMTs, you can stop working on him. So I laid down beside my father. I put my arm over his chest. I was right in his ear. I told him I loved him. I told him he was going to be with my mom, and I knew that's where he wanted to go. And then I did what was the glue in our family. I said the Lord's Prayer, and he was gone. And the EMTs got him on the gurney. So here we're living out what Dad wanted. Took him down the steps and out of the house. The snow is coming down 1 inch an hour because we're in northwestern Pennsylvania. The doors of the ambulance are open, and they set the gurney down, and I'm looking at my father's face, and there's this soft, sweet smile. And Kevin, honest to goodness, this is what I did. I went, yes! The EMTs looked at me like I had lost any marbles that I might have had. But I said to him, You've given Dad his dying wish, feet first out of his own home. So my passion around the second book is all of us have those discussions with our kids. Make those discussions legal. If we're an older person, to really say, this is what I'd like. If we're the younger person, please don't say, oh, don't talk about it. It's not going to happen now. I lost a brother when he was 26. Oh, yeah, I would have loved to have known what. I mean, we were traumatized by the loss of someone so young, but it would have made it easier, as it did make it for me, to know what I knew, to give my dad that gift.
And a great gift it was as well. So, Yvonne, we need to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the documentation, what you did, how it worked, how that you were like a mama bear taking care of your cub, because you had to negotiate the hospital. You had to negotiate these men that were standing in your house trying to get because they're trained to, at all costs, save a life. And how that you were able to do that. I got to tell you, you're kind of a tough cookie. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And Yvonne Caputo is here. She's an author. She's a teacher. She's a psychotherapist. Is there anything you haven't done? You haven't been a lawyer, but you went and got one because you had several things that you needed to have done. I got to tell you a quick story real quick. When my dad, two things. Because of my radio background, I was able to take my equipment up to my dad's house and was able to interview him. And I wanted to interview him on his life story. What did it mean to him? How did he grow up? The work that he did, everything about him, how he met my mom, how he wanted to be remembered, all of that. So we did that. And 3 months later, he had major surgery. And during the course of that surgery, he had a brain bleed and had a stroke, could no longer swallow, could not move he was partially paralyzed. But he was still in the ICU. When he was in the ICU, the doctor who had done the cancer surgery wanted to keep him alive because that's what doctors do. He had the surgery, the cancer surgery he felt was successful, and my dad was going to live several more years. But he wasn't going to be able to swallow. He wasn't going to be able to talk. He couldn't even watch TV, but we could keep him alive. And so they were within about 30 minutes of putting in a feeding tube into his stomach because he could no longer eat or drink. And my mom produced his end of life directive, which stopped the process and allowed his passing to occur naturally. Mm-hmm. That was an important piece. And then we took his the CD that we'd made, now it could be digital, and we played that at his memorial service, so you could hear him tell his story in his own life, in his own voice, and it brought the house down. It was a very important moment, and that you had the foresight. What was it? What was it about you to have the foresight to understand? Was it his to understand that this is a conversation you needed to have with him?
It all started in the retirement community. And I saw face to face what happened when those legal documents weren't created. That people had to be kept alive because there was nothing to say they wanted to go. So when I found this out, I called Dad and I said, "Do you have an advance directive?" And he said, "No, what's that?" Well, I explained it to him. And I said, "If you're all right with this, I'll find an attorney. I'll come back to Meadville and we'll get it done." And he said, "Okay." So we did that together. Now, that advance directive made me the healthcare agent and would have prevented any kind of medical care that Dad didn't want. Going back to my story of retirement community, then I became aware of this document called the 5 Wishes, which is also legal in 42 states. And when I sat and read through the document, I went, I got to do this with Dad. This is so much more than what we did in the attorney-sponsored advance directive. How comfortable did he want to be? What did he want his children to know? What kind of a funeral did he want? He was Roman Catholic. He wanted a full mass, a high mass. My husband has a glorious tenor voice. So he said, Kirk will sing. He will sing the Ave Maria, the Lord's Prayer, and Amazing Grace. He knew that morphine would shorten his life. But he said, if I'm uncomfortable at that point, what does it matter? Just make sure I'm not in pain. I mean, all of this was in the 5 Wishes. So when the time came, thank you for calling me strong, but it wasn't really that. It was, what did Dad want? What did he trust me with? I couldn't let him down. I couldn't not follow what he had asked of me. So in reality, if I think back to those moments, I was on automatic pilot.
Yeah.
I was on automatic pilot. And I think that this is probably true for people who do a lot of things. They know something so well, they just go ahead and do it.
Well, I got to tell you, that is what you did for him is the highest form of love that there is.
And here's what I get that I want your audience to know. Do I miss my dad? Absolutely. Have there been experiences? He's been gone 14 years now. Are there times when I'm just a flood of tears because I want to cook him one more pot roast dinner? And I've got a ton of questions about the war and other things in his life that I never asked him. There are those times. But the other thing that I have is this profound, sacred joy. I didn't have joy over my mother's passing. I didn't have joy over my brother's passing. But with my dad, my grief journey changed in that I call it my divine paradox. And paradox is you can and you can't, you will and you won't, it isn't and isn't. And my divine paradox is I did something very difficult to achieve something very beautiful.
And you do know that your dad is with you every day.
Every day.
And that, it's one of the things that, and I wanted to have you on because I want people to understand that, yes, death is part of life. And it happens. By gum, Yvonne, it's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to me.
Death and taxes.
That's it. But we need to have a different perspective on it. The perspective that you have on it, which in your dad's case was, at the end of the day, he got exactly what he was looking for, because in my dad's case, had they put that feeding tube into his stomach, he would have suffered for years.
Yes.
He would have been in that nursing home that you were working at, in his bed with bed sores and with all that. And that was exactly because of the interview I did with him. We knew exactly that wasn't what he wanted. But
Right.
the hospital, I got to ask you this, because the hospital said, well, I think it's great that you interviewed him and he doesn't want this and stuff, but we have to have documentation.
Yes.
How did you get the hospital the documentation to be able to, so that they had it in his chart?
Every time Dad went into the hospital, I called him and said, just in case, is there a do not resuscitate order on your chart? And every time we got one of those. So besides having the advance directive and the 5 wishes, I also made sure that a DNR was on his chart, so that's what the doctor had. The emergency room doctor had that document where my father said, no, I do not want to be resuscitated. So one of the things that the retirement community taught me is having all the bases covered.
Yes. That's a big deal.
And I also want your audience to know that a nursing facility cannot end life.
No.
If the words, if they've had those conversations, if it's not signed, sealed, and delivered on a legal document, there's nothing that could be done. So your father would have been put on a feeding tube. So that's the other passion I have. My children know where my advance directive is. My children have copies of my 5 wishes. I have selected my healthcare agent. I have told them, if I get to the point where I can't take care of myself, I want you to find me a good home. Now, I worked in a very good one. I worked in an exquisite home. Is a nursing wing anything anybody wants to be on? No, of course not. But our nursing wing was as compassionate as one could be. So I have gone ahead. My she's now 23. My 23-year-old granddaughter was diagnosed at 17 with leukemia.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
hospital that she was in, Children's Hospital, she had to do her 5 wishes. So it's becoming more and more. When I talked to my own physician about this, I was in the exam room and he opened up the door and there was a stack of 5 wishes, so that when he was having these conversations with his patients, he could hand those documents out.
Good for him. That's important.
Yeah, it is.
And because there's nothing, I can't think of anything worse than, because I asked the doctors, they had a conference with us when my dad was, before they put the feeding tube in. And they said, will my dad be able to watch and understand television? And they said, well, no, we don't think so. I said, will he be able to read? Oh, certainly not. Will he be able to talk? Oh, no, he'll be a vegetable. And he's going to sit there until the cancer takes him, which would be a couple of years probably. And it's like, no, we're not that we can't allow that to be. But they have, without that documentation, correct me if I'm wrong, but without that documentation, they have no choice.
That's right. And that's right. That's my first experience, is that I was on the ethics committee in the retirement community, and we had a resident who was in the end stages of dementia. and she had developed a physical problem. And there was an advance directive, but it was written in a different state. And that's a critical piece too. Knowing the state you're in, knowing what your state requires. And this case that we worked on as an ethics committee, we had to take it to the court. We didn't have the power to make a decision. The court said that medical treatment could be given to this woman, and if it didn't work, then her daughter could say no more. I didn't want that for my dad.
Well, there have been lots and lots of cases. There was that case several years ago in Florida, where, and I forget the name of the young lady, but there was a great big court case about whether or not she could be given assistance past what she had wanted, and with a feeding tube and with all of that. And it's becoming more and more clear, I think, to people that this is a necessary. It's like filling out your, when you get your Social Security card, filling that out. This is part of that, because this is exactly part of life. Again, we're talking with Yvonne Caputo, and she's got the 2 books out, Flying with Dad and Dying with Dad. And both of them are very positive and done in a very loving way, because of the things that the relationship. And, I am so happy for you that the relationship that you had with your dad at the end was great. There's so many people, including my sister. My dad passed before that was possible. And that is too bad, because she's had to live with that. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more, and we might even mention the publicist again, because they seem to have done a great job for you. So we'll be right back after this real quick. It's 30 seconds, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And by the way, if you're a father, this might convince you to become a dad.
They have your eyes. They have your ears. They have your smile. Now all they need is a little more of your time. Make a difference in your child's life, because anyone can be a father. It takes time to be a dad.
See, that wasn't long. That was just 30 seconds. But I wanted to get that in, because that is an important piece that I think all the men that are out there, and you're talking about, or have fathered a child or 2 or more and stuff, it's important for you to become a real dad to them, because you may be saving them from being a lost generation, and we don't want that. So we want every child to grow up healthy and happy, and with the love of a dad. And I know that sometimes it takes a while, but Yvonne, I'm so glad that you found that in your life with your dad. That is really a positive thing.
It is. I relish it. I mean, it's very hard for me to describe to an audience of what it was like to have that relationship with my dad at the end. I just, it's like I said, it's hard to describe. We could talk about pretty much everything, and it's in Flying with Dad. But I'll let your audience know too, that in these discussions that Dad and I would have, my mom died in 2002. Maybe a year or 2 later, Dad started to date. And he let me know about it, and I was A-okay with it. I felt, he's by himself. He certainly has the right to want some company. There wasn't anything that would make me feel like it was something that my mother wouldn't have wanted. So I got to meet the woman that he wanted to date, and we were on the phone, and he said something about sex. We didn't talk about it, Kevin, because I wasn't going to go there. I mean, we had discussions about death and dying. We had discussions about nightmares. We had discussions about the flashback that my dad had 60 years after the war. We talked all about that, but I just couldn't go into a conversation with my father about sex.
Well, by the way, that's not really all that unusual, because if you can visualize that, then it's like that's way too much information than you need. And
That's right.
if he wants to go and do that in the privacy of his own bedroom, you don't need to know any of the details.
I don't. And it must have been that he read the coldness or the hesitancy, because we never talked about it again. But he would say on phone conversations, Yvonne, I want to go.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me, Dad, what's going on? You want to go? And he would say, I can't drive. I'm here all by myself. I get good care. He would just tell me what was going on at that moment. There were times that I would say, hey, how are you with wanting to go? Well, not today. It's been a good day. It's been a good week. I'm ready to hang in there for a little bit. So we would go back and forth on that. It just became such an open part of the conversation that we had, because he was comfortable with it and I was comfortable with it.
By the way, before you, I don't mean to interrupt this thought, but was he a Pittsburgh Steeler fan?
Absolutely.
Oh, I used to like him. Now I'm not so. I'm a Seattle Seahawk fan, and my team we lost the Super Bowl to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was happy that day as much as I was sad. Anyway, I'm sorry. I wanted to get that in, because I know he was a sports guy, and that was really important to him, and stuff. So that's really cool.
Yeah, he really was. And Steelers, the Pirates, Penn State. Mm-hmm.
Oh, he was Pittsburgh, or he was Pennsylvania all the way through.
Yeah, he was born and raised in Scranton, and then he moved to Meadville after the war. So he was very much a Pennsylvania sports fan. And I couldn't call him if I knew a game was on. All of our Sunday conversations had to happen either before the game or after the game, because he wouldn't talk to me.
Well, and that's a sad thing, because my dad also was a football fan, and we were in Seattle, and this is even before the Seahawks were around, and so I became a Baltimore Colts fan because they were on every Sunday and stuff. And my dad watched them all the time, but my sister didn't. My sister she didn't understand football, didn't care for it, and so rather than him inviting her to sit on his lap and to teach her the game and to just spend time with her and him, he just watched football.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't get it, and so that was hard. That was hard growing up for her, and I'm glad, and like it was for you, but I'm glad the outcome for you was so good.
Well, when you said what you said, it made me think of one of my favorite values, and that's respect. I respected my father's love of football and didn't call him when it was on. I respected my father's wanting a high mass. Underneath, I think the opening up is that Dad got this sense of the fact that I respected him. And so my mother said to me, because Dad and I had a horrific argument one time, and I left the table to go for a walk because I knew if I said something, it would be cruel and I'd never be able to take it back. And she said to me in my 30s, your father isn't going to come to you. You're going to have to go to him. And when I learned to do that, even in my 30s, we got close around car buying decisions or putting up a rod in my apartment, in the closet. I mean, we got on that kind of a level, but the kind of intimate soul level that I wanted with my dad came when he understood how much I respected him.
What I found, because my dad kind of did the same thing, in that as we get older and we let the ego go a little bit, and we're not as sharp necessarily, and the things that matter to us, well, you worked in nursing homes, that on our dying day, the things that matter to us is not money, it's not position, it's not possessions, it's family, it's love, and it's, did I do everything in my life that I wanted to better the planet and to better each other? And that's a big deal.
When we were doing the 5 wishes, and I asked him the question, what do you want your children to know? He said, I want them to know that I love them. I wasn't always good at showing it, but I want them to know that I love them.
That is the essence of what most people want when they're in their dying days. They want people to know how much they actually meant. And we don't always do that very well.
And the other question in the 5 wishes is, how do you want to be remembered? And my father said, when I asked the question, he said, my Red Cross, my volunteering at the Red Cross. And I was a little taken aback because I thought he'd say the war, because we talk so much about it. I said, well, what about the war? And he said, well, that too. So when I was doing the research on the book, because a lot of the times he would say things to me that either didn't ring true or I didn't have enough information to really, tell the story, I went on a mission to the Red Cross office to find out if they had anything on my dad and my dad's volunteering. Kevin, I found out he volunteered for the Red Cross for 41 years.
Bless his soul.
41 years. And he was president, and he was on their committees, and he helped to bring emergency services into Meadville to the hospitals. I didn't know that about him.
And again, that is why it is so important to anybody who's listening to this. Please, please, please get some of this stuff that they did in life, either on tape, in digital form, a journal, something, so that it can be held as part of his legacy for the next generations. I feel it's that important.
It is.
Unfortunately, my dear, we've run out of time, but you're going to have to come back so that we can talk more. Yvonne Caputo has been our guest, and go get her books, Flying with Dad and Dying with Dad. They both are, I can't pronounce it, Ingenium, is that right?
Ingenium
books, and you can go to YouTube and you can go to Amazon or anywhere. They're all out there. And so thank you for coming here and talking. Is there anything you'd like to add before we go?
Just go back to that passion of mine, to your audience. Have those conversations with your loved ones and make them legal. It changes the world.
I can't imagine what would have happened to my dad if he'd been in a feeding tube for 2 or 3 years. What a horrible existence. So thank you. And I'm going to do this for my kids, because you never know.
That's right.
I have an expiration at the bottom of my foot and I can't see it from here. So it could happen anytime.
Right.
Yvonne, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got. That's Kevin@kmmedia.pro.